Welcome to Draconian, your podcast for news and updates in Hong Kong and Taiwan. I'm your host, William.
Hi everyone, welcome to the episode 19 of the Draconian podcast. This is your host, William. This week's episode will be about how elections and education have topped this week's events in Hong Kong and Taiwan. From the district council elections in Hong Kong to the education system in Taiwan, this week's political and social developments in these two regions seems to show a much more divergent future for these two regions. If you would like to learn more about what's happening in these two regions, please subscribe to our podcast, whether you are listening from your favorite podcast app or directly from YouTube or its music app. So, the first topic will be about Hong Kong, and this is what we have promised in last week, about updates on the district council elections. A record low participation rate had been recorded in this year's district council elections. The voter turnout turned to be approximately 27.5%, which is a very huge slump at the over 71% when compared to the last partially free district council elections held in 2019, as there are basically no candidates that are critical of the government participating in this year's election. Or if you can say it's more of a selection. As expected, only pro-government parties and patriots can run, so there is a very disillusioned interest of the government versus the interest of the general public. As a result, the government had put a lot of money into promoting this election. However, it seemed that they only received few, if not no actual positive result. This was touted as an election even worse than the 1942 Japanese election, within commentators that are critical of Hong Kong, where there would be at least some form of competition in 1942 with technically non-government approved candidates being still able to run at that election, while that is completely impossible in this district council elections. Furthermore, this had actually shown how the government have transformed the district council from a mostly free election system with a more devolved power, or having a more devolved power, as promised as the disintegration of the urban council in 1999 to a completely government-controlled system where you can say it is just another mouthpiece controlled by the government. It can also be considered as a new patriotic district council, where it is reminiscent of Chinese of Villagers Committee or 村委会 in rural China, although labeled as a democratic and self-determined organization. Candidate filtering by the Chinese Communist Party was in place, while in that case by the Chinese Communist Party directly in Chinese 村委会 or Villagers Committee, while in Hong Kong's case is a more indirect way where people of the CCP would be able to determine how the Hong Kong government would be able to act. Furthermore, the government actually placed a 1.1 billion Hong Kong dollar budget for the 88 seats for hosting this year's election, which is actually a quite dramatic increase from a 600 million budget to host the 2019 elections, where there were 452 seats being available for competition at that time. So basically, this extended budget seems to stem from all the government plans, roadshows, mass concerts, and various different activities hosted for in so-called boosting voter turnout, which indirectly boosts the so-called internationally recognized try to label this as an internationally recognized or election that meets so-called international standards. Also, as discussed last week, this is also the first time the government subsidized elderlies to vote, which actually had never happened before. the government also, for the first time in history, in election history in Hong Kong, set up a voting souvenir distribution booth where the government distributed cards for those who voted. This, although not compulsory, it may actually be considered as a means of so-called pressurizing people to come out and vote, as those um those souvenirs, although not labeled by name, actually can be used as a means of coerced voting or a mandatory voting system to so-called label you as a person who have voted. This is only about the preparation of the election itself. However, the election itself was also riddled with some irregularities. An extension of the voting time happened because of the breakdown of the electronic voters system or the electronic voters list at approximately 8 p.m. for approximately 30 minutes. As a result, the Election Commission extended the voting time for another 90 minutes and effectively made this vote the longest in Hong Kong's history, where basically people have voted for approximately 15.5 hours or able to vote in 15.5 hours. At the same time, this low voter turnout had effectively forced the government to make up reasons for the low turnout as basically the so-called elected district councillors or the selected district councillors do not even have a mandate enough. As the basic form of norm of the governments in Hong Kong after 2020, where government would always make up unrelated reasons for whatever setbacks the mass or citizens have basically showed their middle finger to the government. Apart from this more partial universal suffrage, or you can't say suffrage at all, the government also hosted elections for district council seats where the only government appointed bodies will be able to vote, which are marked as basically a puppet election. This puppet election actually resulted in a more than 93% turnout, with some of the districts even having 100% turnout, which is technically a norm for government-controlled puppet elections, as seen in both China, North Korea, and other not that democratic countries, where a 99 to 100% turnout is the technical norm. The government also appointed another 176 district council members, which were announced earlier in this Tuesday, which we will not be covered. However, upon quick checking, it seems that basically a majority of those are district councillors who lost in the 2019 elections because of this democratic wave or the resentment against the government, which pushed them out of the district council itself. As a result, some basically saying that this is just another puppet election. While I cannot directly comment on this whole issue, I would consider this district council elections as something that would actually need to be technically need to be where the Western societies would need to pay extra attention to, as both the government itself and Chinese authorities are already advertising themselves successfully hosting this district council election. There are also some irregularities apart from this, but those are relatively minor, so this would not be discussed in this week's episode. And now let's go to the second subtopic about Hong Kong. There are more obstacles for people from Hong Kong to leave, but this time not from the Hong Kong government itself, as Western countries are reconsidering and amending their immigration policies, which technically indirectly affected citizens, affected how Hong Kong citizens could be able to leave. So there are two different news or two different independent news, but it seems that there where you can actually have a picture, a larger picture showing this whole you can't say issue, but this whole trend of technically restricting the amount of immigrants. So the first is about plans from the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom had confirmed plans to hike the immigration health surcharge and limiting the amount of visas being issued to prospective immigrants, effective next year. This hike is expected to boom the surcharge from approximately £1,500 per year, where only 3 years ago, this charge was approximately £500 per year. This means that a 5-year BNO visa, when applied at that time, will have an immigration health surcharge similar to a 1.5 years of stay, or not 1.5 to 2 years of stay, or 2.5 the immigration health surcharge for a 2.5-year BNO visa. This created worries as basically a lot of local netizens and even local commentators are touting this as UK's middle finger towards Hong Kong citizens or towards the BNO visa system. However, the visa system explicitly omitted Hong Kong as a policy, as the affected policy, as basically the Hong Kong BNO visa in the United Kingdom was considered or is considered as a somewhat asylum visa, as seen by different integration plans and the government's 6 monthly reports to the Parliament. So this is about the United Kingdom. So at the same time, Australia had also announced its interim plans to restrict the visas offered to basically offered globally. As there are no independent Hong Kong visa or a Hong Kong stream or a Hong Kong visa system, basically this would actually technically affect Hong Kong citizens as well. So Australia had the plan itself was to basically restrict the application or the use or the abuse of the student visas and student and dependent visas and the amount of visa switches that happen within Australia. As Australia has announced plans to lower the max age for which a student visa holder studying in Australia could transfer to another visa. The age was reduced from the maximum 50 years old to 35 years old. At the same time, it also tries to limit the number of transfers and bridging visas that student visa holders can get to switch between different visas, from previously no direct limit to a proposed maximum of 4 different visas. Furthermore, the country also planned to raise the minimum English level for various student visas from an IELTS 6 to an IELTS 6.5, which are technically not in line with international standards as there are none, but it's more in line of the required English level where you can basically sustain a living in Australia. For a decent amount or for a decent income job, of course. It also tried to relax rules for visas that attract high income individuals, where if you are having an annual income of more than 130,000 Australian dollars for a prospective job, then you would be able to expedite your visas from previously a various different months, a few months, to a new target of just 1 week. So these two events are some of the events that technically happened last week or discussed broadly in Hong Kong last week. However, there are also various plans. For example, the visa plans for Canada itself was technically will end technically at 2026, where Stream A will officially end, or if there are no extensions, will not apply to individuals who graduate after 1st of September on 2026. While for graduate, possibly it may extend for a bit longer, but there are warnings that this extension won't be a long time. And for the United States, there are no direct lifeboat programs, as they consider the issue of Hong Kong should be determined by the United Kingdom, which is one of the signatories of the Sino-British Joint Declaration, or British-Sino Joint Declaration, where the British denounced China of breaking or not following whatever was agreed with it for that joint declaration. So this is about. So these two are the news that happened within Hong Kong. So next up, we will have news about Taiwan. So next up, these are news from Taiwan. So there will be two news about Taiwan. One is about the election itself, and the other is about the education system. So let's start with the election itself first. So after the so-called the basically after the opposition broke down, or their attempts to file a joint ticket broke down, the leader of the Taiwan's People's Party, Dr. Ko Wen-je, seeks to distance himself from the unity before the breakup, and basically publicly denounced the current two major party systems which are currently in Taiwan. Furthermore, he also denounced that the president should not have that amount of real responsibility, and basically telling the whole story, saying that and basically not using a more traditional way to so-called fight, or to so-called secure, or to run for this presidency. He tried, albeit a bit unsuccessfully, tried to use various terms and various policies to please voters. For example, by denouncing current education systems. For example, saying that Taiwan is basically lacks everything from eggs to vaccines to whatever things, and etc. So this is about how Ko is running for the candidacy. And the second is about how the Chinese Kuomintang is running for the candidacy. So the Chinese Kuomintang is using, or continue using, its hate-filled agenda by saying that the Chinese Kuomintang will basically restart the idea of a special prosecution group to prosecute whatever bad happened in the DPP. What happened bad happened when the DPP ruled over the island. At the same time, the Chinese Kuomintang also issued various public efforts just denouncing the Democratic Progressive Party, and used various different infographics, advertisements, and even using the election himself and various channels, I would say, to just denounce just the Democratic Progressive Party, but not the Taiwan People's Party. A very interesting thing, though. Furthermore, they are now trying to use so-called new media, or the Chinese Kuomintang is trying to use new media by using various advertisements as shown, but this time more electronic ones, for example, Facebook ads, to try to fight and try to denounce various candidates. For example, by saying that the DPP is unfit to rule because of what they have done in the past 8 years, and basically omitting the Taiwan People's Party at large to so-called prevent whatever things, or to prevent support from their grassroots supporters from supporting the Taiwan People's Party. At the same time, the coordination and the breakup of the blue-white coalition have gone into another level, as basically they are now under probe for collusion against a fair election. A bit background here. So actually, it is illegal to form alliances to run for elections in Taiwan by offering monetary terms or by offering some non-monetary but some guarantees for power or a power split agreement. In Taiwan, it is 搓圆仔汤, 搓圆仔汤. And basically, this collaboration is not an issue. However, the issue for this collaboration is about the documents that were signed during this push for a joint ticket. So as there are discussions and contracts were signed up, for example, for how government departments are being split between between party lines, or how the government should be run, and these different documents are considered as something that basically violated the law. As a result, this actually led. There are no direct consequences right now, but the Ministry of Justice had basically announced its so-called Taipei prosecution or 北检 Taipei 检察署 said that they are currently actively investigating former President Ma Ying-jeou, the leaders of the two parties, Ko Wen-je and basically Chu, and Ho, for any wrongdoing, for basically providing checks and promises so as to form one joint ticket or persuading another person not to run independently. Although it seems that this election, it seems that there aren't any very direct consequences, it may down the line lead to some change in election rules or change in explicit election rules, but these are basically not all certain. But these are all the updates or all the election updates or the major election updates that happened in last week in Taiwan. And next up, this is about Taiwan's education system under much more scrutiny. Two teenagers set fire on a careful house in Taoyuan by playing fire with compressed aerosol cans filled with pesticides. So basically, those are pesticide cans, and immediately burst into flames and substantially damaged the store, which created or effectively led to an expected economic loss for a 200 million new Taipei dollar turnover for the Carrefour Group. This news itself was partially fun, not only because some bad teenagers trying to play fire in a confined environment, but also the parents of those teenagers are basically saying that they will not bail the teenager out because one, they are unable to pay the expected economic cost for Carrefour, and two, they don't deem these teenagers, or they deem those teenagers should bear the cost of whatever they have done. This is actually quite interesting, considering how the teenagers are basically 18, or basically they are just teenagers and they are actively being educated or just a few years after graduation. However, after this event happened, the education or the new education syllabus, which got in hand in 2019, or in Taiwan's case, 108课纲 108 education syllabus. This actually flamed a lot of controversies as election looms, even after 5 years after this syllabus was placed into actual use. The removal of required classical Chinese readings created controversies where a local pro-China, I literally mean pro-CCP here actually, or or a teacher with a very strong political opinion, where she will actually actively convey the message to students, taught in a local prestigious high school, led the charge against the syllabus by pointing out this is a Taiwan independence education syllabus, or 台独课纲. This came in a coincidence when the Chinese Kuomintang also actively denounced the education syllabus from its education or its platform or its election platform about education, where they will try to abolish the 108 education syllabus. As a result, this actually created, albeit not very publicly, created a lot of discussion of not only about the teacher herself, the timing itself, but also the idea of party-state education system, which was basically a norm in China right now and was in Free China, about Taiwan, until late 1980s, where education was basically intertwined with various pro-government messages. And lastly, this news is both about Hong Kong and Taiwan. So there is an academic conference in Taiwan where it's about the study of Hong Kong. Academia Sinica, Taiwan's government-owned research institute, hosted a Hong Kong Studies conference in the 8th of December. The conference had spotlight on various issues related to Hong Kong, which included Hong Kong Studies itself, the national security law, the 2019 Anti-Extradition Bill or Extradition Law Amendment Bill, protests, the identity of Hong Kong, Hong Kong art, Hong Kong culture, and the diasporas of Hong Kong. The conference was hosted for a full day in the Department of Sociology in Academia Sinica, where the Academia Sinica the institute actually invited individuals from various communities, which interestingly, includes academics still in Hong Kong or still teaching in Hong Kong academics now learning and teaching in Taiwan, and other academics all over the world, but considered as Hong Kongese diasporians. They participated in various streams which discussed the identity of Hong Kong itself, discussed the effect of the anti-extradition law, bill amendment protests, and etc., and the national security, etc. And basically, this shows a trend where the study of Hong Kong will need to be conducted in Taiwan, interestingly. This is basically the first time Hong Kong have become the core interest in an academic conference that is hosted in Taiwan about the discussion of the identity of Hong Kong after 2019. Furthermore, it also showed how Taiwan is taking over Hong Kong's role to study China and its city, as basically this conference also discussed Hong Kong's original prestige status as a go-to place for China studies, where now, because of the security law, have basically removed it, effectively shut down. So all of this is about this rather short episode of episode 19, which was shortened because of the condition and because of some restructuring happening within the podcast itself. So lastly, to conclude, we hope you find this episode informative. And if you do, please subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss a single episode. Furthermore, if you have any feedback, please let us know in the comments or drop us an email at william@dragonianpod.com. Thanks again for listening. We will be back next week for episode 20 of the Dragonian podcast with more news from Hong Kong and Taiwan, which may interest you and will definitely let you learn more about Hong Kong and Taiwan. Have a safe, prosperous, and happy week ahead. Goodbye!